I'm joined this evening by Dr. Gavin Ashenden. He's the former chaplain to Queen Elizabeth II, and he converted to Catholicism a couple of years ago, and very famous commentator in this side of the pond as regards all things Anglican. And we've had a very interesting week with an Anglican bishop being able to say Mass at the Pope's altar in Rome, the center of the Catholic world, really. And I just thought I'd ask Gavin to give us your view, your opinion on this whole controversy, and what are your thoughts on it, and the ramifications of what happened last Tuesday, the 18th of April.
Well, Robert, as we said before we started the recording, my thoughts are best described as being fruity. And I feel I'm qualified to give my thoughts from the Anglican side. Mm-hmm. I'm not qualified to explain how it happened from the Catholic side. I mean, they're saying it's a mistake in communication. Let me first of all saying that although I'm not qualified to talk from the Catholic side very well, because I don't know whether miscommunication is code for we always wanted it to happen and we're very sorry we got caught out in public, and so we're pretending to change our mind, which it might be. But what we do know is it's the most dreadful offence to the ordinariate, mm-hmm. Because these are the same tribe in Anglican terms. They're the same people. They're Anglo-Catholics, and they all belong to the society. And since the ordinariate way was opened, something like 100+ Anglican priests from the society, from the Anglo-Catholic Society, have paid a very significant sacrifice. I mean, they've got much more out of it than they've given up, but they had to give up a lot, mm-hmm. and they've become Catholic priests, and by and large, they're very good ones. And there's no point in beating around the bush. When I asked somebody who's in the know, I won't give his name, but you can expect him to know exactly what's going on. I said, why have this lot? We know who they are. They're all colleagues. Some of them are friends. Some of them are not friends. Why have they stayed behind? And the only answer is because most of them want to indulge their homosexual preferences, okay. And they would find it difficult to do it as Roman Catholics. And that may surprise some people, but and I'm sorry to say, but the Anglo-Catholic movement, particularly in London, where Jonathan Baker is Bishop of Fulham, is notoriously full of people who live out their gay preferences. And are proud of it, and have created a subculture. Mm-hmm. And only the ones who are willing to have given that up join the ordinariate. So there are two reasons for wanting to defend the ordinariate. The first is that these are people who want to be Catholic and became Catholic. They had the courage of their convictions, and they paid the price. The second is the people who came across have high ethical standards, and they live them out. And the people who, by and large, one shouldn't generalize, and one shouldn't point the finger, and there would be exceptions. But by and large, the people who stayed behind belong to a culture where gay proclivity was one of the hallmarks of the group. And so, if you like, this leads to a more charged situation, because so the good guys, from my point of view, and perhaps your point of view, and perhaps some of our listeners' point of view, are in the ordinariate. So now when the bad guys, or the guys who won't pay the price or won't clean up their ethical behavior, when they approach Rome and say, we're on a kind of a cross between a holiday and a pilgrimage, and we'd like to strut around in the most prestigious church we can find in order to strengthen our wholly misconceived opinions that we are Catholic priests, and they're given a church, it causes a problem. Now, why are their opinions wholly misconceived? The answer is because they call themselves Catholic Anglicans. But if they really were Catholic, then they would have to take Apostolica Curiae seriously. And Apostolica Curiae said, for two very good reasons. It took me about 20 years before I read it. But when I read it, it's completely convincing. And the answer is the change of liturgy in the Anglican ordination service moved radically away from a Catholic sacrificing priesthood towards a Lutheran and indeed a Zwinglian model of ministry, in which deliberate ambiguity was placed, actually not ambiguity, contradiction into the liturgy, about what the Eucharist or the Holy Communion service was. Essentially, what Cranmer wanted to do was to make a space where high-ish Lutherans and very low Zwinglians could coexist in the same allegiance. So he gave them each bits of the liturgy that they could say, look, this means we are right, and hope they wouldn't notice that they were in complete contradiction to another bit of the liturgy. And then so all through my Anglican life, people said, isn't Cranmer comprehensive? Isn't he paradoxical? Isn't he multi-layered? How sophisticated is the Anglican liturgy? But this isn't true. It was a contradiction, and it was a political trade-off. It was a polished but ethically empty piece of liturgy. I mean, how can you create a piece of liturgy that says two different things at the same time, and say this? It was a political thing. So first of all, the liturgy gives no basis whatsoever in either the Holy Communion service, and absolutely not in the ordination service, for saying this is priesthood. In fact, all Anglicans who are not of an Anglo-Catholic persuasion won't use the word priest. They talk about minister, and the ordinal uses minister and priest or presbyter interchangeably. There is no sense whatsoever that the Catholic view of priesthood is being maintained. Quite the opposite. And there's no sense at all that the Eucharist or the service of Holy Communion has got much to do with the Mass. I mean, in fact, the 39 Articles deliberately say it hasn't.
Exactly.
So how much more un-Catholic could you be? And then before some of the more sacramental elements were reintroduced after the Edward VI prayer book, which was a pretty hard-hitting prayer book, there was a gap of about 100 years. And so Apostolica Curiae says, well, first of all, this gap is too long a period to even pretend, even if there was some continuity of apostolic touch, which we can't prove and we don't know. The Anglicans say there is, the Catholics say it doesn't look like there was. And if there was, it took place with 3 people in a pub, apparently, and was badly documented, or else they. But even if there was, you've changed both the ordination service and the liturgy to something unrecognizable to the Catholic Mass. So how are you claiming continuity? I mean, it simply isn't possible. What actually happened was, of course, that within the sacramental and patristic renewal of the Oxford movement, Newman and others looked around and said, well, we've got a few pegs we could hang our understanding on. So let's hang them on there. And then what happened was, as Rome took some interest in the matter and pronounced and said, no, you haven't got any pegs, and Newman had teased the populace by in a very clever way exploring the overblown adjectives of the tracts, of the articles, sorry, in his tracts, and tract 90 particularly. And then Newman realized this whole project is completely impossible. I'd better become a Roman Catholic. Yeah. Pious and other ones said, well, we can go on pretending. It's more comfortable to pretend, so we'll go on pretending. And I'm afraid the Anglo-Catholic movement of the Anglican Church is a pretend movement, and it's helped by the fact that we stole the cathedrals.
Yeah,
because we stole the cathedrals, and then we started reintroducing Catholic dress, and then breaking their vows of obedience and using Catholic liturgy instead of Anglican liturgy, because you'll be surprised there aren't any moral standards in the Church of England, but there are, and you have to make a vow of obedience to only use the liturgies that have been used. So the Anglo-Catholics break this vow instantly and then use Catholic liturgies and say, look how Catholic we are. Well, where is the integrity in any of this? It's not the Mass, it's Holy Communion. They're not priests, they're ministers of religion. They're breaking their vows to use an illegal liturgy. How is this honoring to God? How is it honoring to Catholicism? And so the ordinariate say, look, guys, if you want to be Catholic, Benedict made it possible. Come and be Catholic with us. And they say, no, we're not going to do that. But they have the cheek to go to Rome and pick out the most prestigious church there is and say, we'd like to say Mass here, please. And some idiot or someone who owes somebody a favor, more likely, says, yeah, we can sneak you in. No one will notice. But of course, they put it all over the internet to say, look how Catholic we are. People do notice. And people are rightly disgusted. I use the word disgusted properly because it shows an absence of integrity of any kind. I mean, what do the people in the Society of the Bishop of Column think of the people who went to the Ordinariate? Do they have any respect for them? These are the guys who became Catholic, but they're mimicking them. They're really mocking them, saying, you never had to do this kind of thing. You could have had all the advantages of pretending to celebrate Mass in the Pope's favorite church in Rome, without making any of the sacrifices, without making vows of papal obedience, without the inconvenience of submitting to Catholic doctrine, without the inconvenience of losing your houses. You don't have to do that, guys. Just play act with us. It's pretty bad.
Yeah. I don't think people understand when we talk about the 39 articles. There's a very hard-hitting phrase in one of them regarding the Mass. What was it? Blasphemous.
A blasphemous vain idolatry or something.
Yes. And so when us Catholics read this, what they have said about the sacrifice of the Mass that we hold dear, and then they go up and they use the altar. I mean, it was quite shocking, because they use the altar right in front of the Pope's cathedra. When a Pope speaks ex cathedra, he speaks from that cathedra in St. John Lateran, and they use that photo of saying their version of the Mass in front of that. And at the end of the day, they profess in their articles of faith that it is a blasphemous fable, and this kind of hit home, and it reverberated out. And there was 2 days this week where it was going around the internet, and rightly, Taylor Marshall, being an ex-Anglican, he picked up on this. He felt very aggrieved, and rightly so, about how that group got treated, when we have other groups in the Catholic Church in communion with the Pope that would never be able to use that altar for, say, a traditional Latin Mass. It would have to go through a whole series of approvals, and we all know that there's a famous English cardinal now who doesn't have much love for that right in the church. And yes, these arrived to Rome. Now, they did look very traditional. Some of them had nice vestments on. And I suppose maybe some clerk there in the Basilica says, "Oh, Catholico," and they saw a Pope's or a bishop's skull cap, and they said, "Oh, maybe these guys must be Catholic," and they let them off. Who knows what happened there? But after 2 days, that statement did get issued, that there was a miscommunication about this, and we don't know where. We haven't heard much more after that. But I do think it has stirred up a lot of commentary in the Anglican world and in the Catholic world about what it means to be Catholic and what is the Mass. I think this is going to cascade down. I didn't know about all the ins and outs of that group, that traditional Catholic group in the UK, until this all came to light. But it seems interesting.
But it's not a traditional Catholic group.
Well, they call themselves traditional Catholic.
They do call themselves that. But essentially, it's a pseudo group that is posing. So they pose by wearing all the vestments. Yes, of course they do. But essentially, they want Catholicism without paying any price for it at all. So they pretend. It's a form of liturgical pantomime, and it's highly disrespectful to the Catholic Church. If you want to be a Catholic, you can. Benedict's made it possible. You have to pay a bit of a price. So pay the price. Don't come in. Don't break in by the back entrance free of charge. It's highly disrespectful to Anglicans. It's insidiously deceitful, because these people have sworn an oath in order to be ordained. Then the Anglican Church is very careful. I mean, it says basically you go along with the 39 articles. But the fact is that, I mean, this is part of the deceit of Anglicanism, which the closest thing you can get to a magisterium are the 39 articles of the Book of Common Prayer. I mean, there are basically three forms of authority: the Bible, which people read in different ways; the Book of Common Prayer, which is no longer used anymore, but is supposed to have present the doctrine, lex orandi, lex credendi, and then the articles. No one ever presses you very much on it. In fact, I was ordained without ever reading them. I'm sorry to say. I mean,
wow.
But I'll lay you a bet that 99% of people who are ordained don't read them, or get a lecture saying this is what they once believed, but nobody will ask you about it today. But the formulas require that you assent to them, whatever assent means. But it's an act of hypocrisy. They're saying one thing and doing another. Now, I mean, all the Anglican Church needs to do is say we no longer believe in the 13 Articles, and then you're not signing up to calling the Mass a vain and blasphemous fable. But it hasn't done that yet, and all these people are ordained on that basis. So there's something really pretty sneaky about then posing as Catholic priests in Catholic liturgy, in Catholic vestments, using Catholic liturgy, and then coming to Rome for a holiday and using the most Catholic Church to continue this fable. And particularly, it'd be bad enough if it wasn't for the fact that their friends and colleagues have paid the price for the ordinariate, and they won't do it. So I'm afraid, as you see, I have no respect for them. And I'm afraid I know Jonathan Baker a little. Jonathan Baker was a very well-known senior Freemason.
Mm-hmm.
And because he made no secret of it, it came out, and then he wanted to be ordained. He was offered ordination as a bishop, consecration as a bishop. And a few people said, well, actually, because the Church of England had done some quite good work looking at Freemasonry, and although it was fairly gentle with its conclusions, it did decide that it was a secret society. And what people knew about it, particularly as you dug away past the immediate social layers, that actually it contained a very different religion to Anglicanism or to Catholicism. And so he was told this would be a problem if it came out, and therefore he renounced it on consecration. But it was perfectly obvious he only renounced it because he was told when he wanted to be a bishop. And he's never done so in words that said, actually, this is a really problematic organization that is dividing the church. And in some areas of Europe, it's been responsible for some very serious ill. And I'm sorry I ever got involved in it. I publicly repent. Please forgive me. I will renounce it. Nothing of that. He just said, I'm no longer a Freemason. As if any Freemason who said that really was no longer a Freemason. Yeah. The only people who are not are the people who repent and renounce it. But he gave up public membership as a matter of convenience. Well, I'm afraid, I mean, these are factual. I'm not being rude to him. These are the facts. I'm afraid somebody who does that does not appear to be acting with publicly accountable integrity. I mean, he may do underneath it all, and I may have got it wrong. But other people have said this since he was consecrated, and he's never confronted it. He's never said, yes, you got it wrong. I abhor freedom. I made a mistake. I joined for the wrong reasons. I've discovered that actually it does have a very dark secret and a dark heart. I'm sorry. And he would be in a position to know that and hasn't done it. So he's an Anglo-Catholic, and he works as a right-hand colleague to the woman who purports to be Bishopess of London. And while saying, and of course says, we welcome Bishop, she's called Bishop, let's not be rude, gratuitously rude. We welcome Bishop Sarah. Hooray for Bishop Sarah. We love Bishop Sarah. We support Bishop Sarah. What Catholic in their right mind is genuinely a Catholic could do this? It's pure. It is pure posterior positioning. But it's whatever his reasons for doing it, they're not Catholic. Yeah. So how dare he dress up in Catholic clothes and go to this church and purport to be a believing Catholic, and then arrange to have this pantomime, which is then put out, knowing perfectly well that he's going to gratuitously offend those members who went to the ordinariate, and he will have deceived the Catholic Church, who don't know enough about Anglicanism to know that this is a con job. It's really, really, really a poor situation from the Anglican side, and they should be so ashamed of themselves.
Yeah. I know that this particular group has come to Ireland, and they have said Mass in and I won't say where, but they have said Mass in Catholic locations, but they've kept it low key, and they've kept it within their own members, and they haven't advertised it. So there is dialogue between the Catholic Church and them, and the Catholic Church has let them say Mass, but this was something on a totally different level. This wasn't, okay, say Mass, but don't take any photos, and just be respectful. They openly flaunted the fact, look, we are in the Pope's Basilica, Archbasilica in Rome, the Basilica in Rome, at the Pope's altar, and kind of giving the, to the ordinariate and to many others that have converted to Catholicism, that have sought the truth. And it was I'd say there was a lot of phone calls going on in Rome after the photos came out, and a lot of emails to nuncios, especially in the UK, on this. But I suppose
look,
what
I have to apologize because I've done this too, and I'm sorry. I did it. I'm deeply sorry. I was part of an ecumenical group. I won't mention which one because I don't want to take revenge. But it was an ecumenical group made up of Orthodox, Catholics, and Anglicans who followed a particular seer, a woman who had institutions. And maybe she did, maybe she didn't. That's not the point. But one of the things we did was to seek out well-known Catholic locations to have this ecumenical mass in, and it was done by deceit. And in fact, at one point we went into an important basilica in Rhodes, and the Franciscan who owned it was so angry that he stood at the door and he made all the Catholic priests tell them what their real names were and said, "How dare you? How dare you do this?" And you know, we were all a bit embarrassed because we knew we'd been deceitful, but it was part of the fiction, the internal fiction of this ecumenical group, that somehow we were okay, really, and we proved it by having mass in these places, but they weren't okay. And the Franciscan was quite right to be ballistic, because it was, you know, deceit and the mass shouldn't go hand in hand. Even institutional state of hand shouldn't do. And I'm, you know, that's why I'm embarrassed now, because it was completely the wrong thing to do. But they're doing it worse because the position that, you know, at least amongst us there were some Catholic priests and bishops, I should say, in good standing, who hoped that the rules could be bent without anyone, you know, means justify the end. We thought it was worth, but actually it wasn't. But these people are not doing it with good integrity. And I mean, they overreached themselves. They hoped they could sort of, get away with this, wrong word, doesn't it? But they hoped they could use the privilege. Almost certainly this was arranged by friends in Rome. So the friends in the Anglican Centre in Rome would say, well, we know the guy who will just tell them it's an ecumenical, you know, it's a Catholic mass from, because after all, there are a number of Oriental Catholic groups. Not everyone knows who they are. Not everyone keeps a check. I expect it was done very vaguely. You know, perhaps they knew, perhaps they didn't. As I said, I'm not entitled to comment from the Catholic side, but it will have been done as people scrapped, doing favors to one another, hoping they wouldn't have to be accountable for it. And as soon as they found they were accountable for it, they said it's a mistake. Well, who knows? It's not, unless you know the facts. One shouldn't judge. I don't know those facts on that side. I jolly well know them on the Anglican side, and they're not only without merit, they're with a lot of demerit.
Yeah. I know in other areas, like if you wouldn't arrive to an Orthodox church as a Catholic, and, you know, especially to one of their major locations, and be able to say a Catholic mass, they simply wouldn't allow it.
Right.
And it's a bit sad that this incident did take place in this moment in time, especially with all of the discussions that we've been having on the Roman Rite that has been, you know, forcefully taken out of many Catholic locations.
Well, if you're a supporter of the TLM in any way at all, you would have every reason to feel heartbroken that your fidelity to the Catholic Church was being squeezed into an inhospitable corner. And these people, who by definition are heretics, but by definition, they are pulling the wool over your eyes. By definition, they have no right to be there. By definition, they repudiate the authority of the church. You know, by definition, they should not be allowed in there according to the rules of the Catholic Church, whereas the TLM at least has some claim to be. And these people were given permission, and faithful Catholics aren't. Faithful Catholics are entitled to feel very hurt by that. And I'm not saying that to say, well, you know, they should feel hurt and they should feel angry. I don't intend to. This is a matter for heartbreak, not for anger, and for prayer. But whoever allowed these people in did so in complete disregard of faithful Catholics and faithful Anglicans who became faithful Catholics.
Yeah. I think for us Irish, it's we understand this a little bit more, given the fact that, you know, we had to fight under after the oppression of Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries, and over the years, my own family back in the 1500s, you know, were the last abbot of Fora monastery in Meath was a Nugent, and you know, we have all of the documentation and of him leaving there. Christopher Nugent of Delvin, you know, he wrote the first English-Irish dictionary for Queen Elizabeth, the first one back in the day. So we were connected to all of what was going on in the Reformation, and we remain Catholic at a great price to ourselves. And so, you know, I think just seeing, oh, Anglicans now could do this, but you know, and I do want to stress, we don't hate these people. We just want to show them the truth of our faith, of the beauty of the sacrifice of the Mass, which is sublime, which is, you know, it is the real presence of our Lord Jesus Christ on the altar. It is the re-representation. I don't think Protestants and Anglicans often understand this mystical encounter in the sacrifice of the Mass, and they just see it as, you know, some fable that the Catholic Church has invented, which it really isn't.
But what's worse, I think, is that, so you're quite right, the offence is to people who've paid the price by people who won't pay the price. But one of the things that haunted me as an Anglican was whether or not, when I celebrated the Eucharist, because I wanted it to be the sacrifice of the Mass, I believed in the Mass, I wanted to believe that my orders were valid. But the difficulty is, I mean, the complete contradiction is that you create this fiction in your head, or you create this, let's think of a better word than fiction, you create a pious hope that actually your orders are valid because you want your prayers, you know, you want sacrifice of the Mass, you want all the right things. But the Catholic Church makes that pious hope impossible to maintain, because it says in the highest authority, the authority of the Pope, that your orders are invalid. Mm-hmm. You cannot aspire to be a Catholic and have the Pope say, but you can't be a Catholic and you're not one, and then say, oh yes, I think I am, and still be a Catholic, because a Catholic does not say to the Pope, I think I'm going to contradict you. It's the Pope. It's the teaching of the Church. You can't be any kind of real Catholic if you say that. And I remember thinking, well, I just hope the Pope's wrong, maybe. Mm. You know, yeah. And maybe the Holy Spirit will make up. You know, popes are wrong sometimes. Maybe the Holy Spirit will make it up. But the fact was, I was fooling myself. And that was one of the reasons I became a Catholic in the end. After spending years with, you know, one small part of my brain with a notice saying integrity on the door, flashing a red light saying to the rest of my brain, guys, you know it's not true. Yes. Finally, the door marked integrity won the argument, and the rest of my brain collapsed and said, oh, I'm sorry. We hoped. So, but the problem is, I mean, today particularly, there is no scope for the Anglicans hoping, because Benedict, first of all, said, if you want to be a Catholic, you do this, you join the ordinariate. If you want to be a Catholic and remain Anglican. But the other thing is that Jonathan Baker and all of them have effectively supported the consecration of women as bishops. Yeah. I mean, you know, I was one of the people who gave a talk saying, well, your left-hand side of the brain can pretend these women are only administrators and you can pay them homage as administrator. Don't let it worry the right-hand side of your brain, because they'll give you a flying bishop who isn't a bishop anyway, who isn't a priest anyway, he doesn't celebrate mass, but nonetheless they'll give you one of those, and this will give you immunity against your support for the woman you call bishop as an administrator. The whole thing is nonsense. In fact, although I gave lots of talks explaining how this might be done, on the day that the first woman was consecrated, I went to my altar to pray, and my heart broke, and I resigned that morning, because the fiction in my head couldn't withstand the presence of the Lord. I couldn't kneel before the Lord and pretend. I could pretend in front of people, but as I said, the divine office in my parish church, I couldn't pretend to God. I went and I sent an email of resignation, resigned my orders that day. Oh, well, I'm not saying everyone has to behave like I do, but they know the issue. They know perfectly well that by accepting in any pragmatic way the the de facto authority of a woman who holds herself out to be Bishop of London or Bishop of anything else, they know at the very least they're not Catholics. Well, whatever else they may be.
Yeah.
They're not Catholics. How dare they dress up and pretend to be Catholics like this?
It's a whole world that I wasn't familiar with when these, I suppose we're reading up on what's going on there, because they're like this Anglo-Catholic traditional, this is what they call themselves, an Anglo-Catholic traditional enclave within, the very liberal Anglican church in England, that is supporting blessings of homosexual couples and women priests and everything that the liberal woke agenda is pushing on us. They seem to be, okay, let's take it on, and then you just become irrelevant to the British society. What do we stand for as Christians? Instead of the world leads us, the spirit of the world leads the church. So I just thought it was extraordinary to understand exactly what they were.
Just so you know that this is not me being unkind, there was a very important document called Living in Love and Faith, and the Episcopal group who met in preparation for presenting to Synod included an evangelical bishop called Keith Sinclair and an Anglo-Catholic bishop called Jonathan Baker. Okay. And it was stacked, of course, with liberals. But these were the two traditionalists, one evangelical, one Anglo-Catholic. And it was all about pushing ahead on the LGBT plus agenda. So what would you have expected traditional Christians to do in that case? Well, the traditional conservative evangelical one, Keith Sinclair, dissented and said, I can't in all conscience support this highly politicized document that's intended to act as a Trojan horse, so let in the blessing of gay marriage. What do you think Jonathan Baker, the traditionalist so-called Anglo-Catholic, did?
He supported it?
Have a guess. Yeah, of course he did. Of course he did. And what has the whole supposedly faithful Anglo-Catholic movement in the Church of England said about gay blessings and gay marriage? Nothing.
Yeah.
The evangelicals have worked themselves into some kind of energetic concern. In fact, there's been a conference this week in Kigali where 80% of Anglicans across the world have come together to repudiate the Archbishop of Canterbury. So, the evangelicals are not, they're not all, they're not always the good guys, but you have to give them credit on this matter where they know perfectly well that this movement is not consistent with authentic Christianity. They have said so. Mm-hmm. Where are the Anglo-Catholics? They're completely silent and complicit. Why?
Yeah.
Well, we don't have to answer that. We know why. Yeah. But they can't call themselves Catholics.
Exactly. Just another topic, because you were chaplain to the Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, and we have a very momentous occasion coming up in a couple where the world will see the coronation of King Charles III, which most of us today alive wouldn't have seen the previous one. What are your thoughts on this occasion? Has your invite arrived? Will you be going?
Robert has got lost in the post. Any day now, for sure. I did a video on this a few days ago. Yeah. And I normally get somewhere between sort of 2,000 and 10,000 views on my YouTube, which I'm very pleased with. I'm very grateful. Thank you guys who watch those things. I think this one is heading near 300,000. It's been taken up by others.
Yeah.
And effectively, what I was doing was saying that there's no justification for a Christian monarch asking non-Christian voices to offer prayers in the name of Jesus in an abbey church at a coronation. It's simply, it's a bit like the act of deceit from the Anglo-Catholics. You can't say and mean one thing and do and say and mean another all at the same time. It's, you might think that you might want some kind of Esperanto of spirituality. Well, then become a Unitarian. That's what they do. Mm-hmm. But you can't can't be a Christian. That's not Christians. There is not. I mean, even with Rana's anonymous Christians, these are not anonymous Christians. These are paid up Muslims and paid up Sikhs, and what the Lord does on the last day is up to Him. We have no idea. But even as a fully paid up Christian, I'm preparing for the day of judgment with some trepidation, and so should they. But so it's an absolute nonsense to say that he's defender of all faiths, and in fact, it comes from his Jungian point of view. And so I wrote saying, was this good Jung, but very bad Jesus?
Yeah.
And so it's a great relief that he doesn't appear to be going ahead with it. Apart from anything else, it would be, I mean, if I was advising him, which I would, clearly I'm not, I would say, look, this is politically stupid, because the only people you can rely on you to back the monarchy when it gets tough are going to be the Orthodox Christians. Mm-hmm. They're the only people who have a skin in the game, so to speak, because the whole history of monarchy is a profoundly Christian notion, and with the symbolism of unction, it carries at its heart the notion of the Lord's anointed acting on his behalf in a quasi-episcopal, quasi-clerical, quasi-prophetic function on behalf of the people of God. And actually, this is a two-way street. Prophets who receive the gift and the responsibility and then don't live up to it usually find their lives made a bit uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So one would warn him and say, don't make your life spiritually uncomfortable, and don't make it unnecessarily politically uncomfortable, because you need to have the people you need to be praying for you and watching your back are going to be the traditionalist Christians. And if you betray them, you don't have a constituency who will look after you. The people you're pleasing will not go to the barricades for your monarchy. Yeah. And so I would say this doesn't make sense theologically, and it doesn't make sense politically. So I'm very glad he's not doing it. He's clearly doing everything but. So he's gone to the House of Lords and is finding some very eminent citizens of different faiths. And I think probably this is quite sensible in some ways. I think, we are at this difficult moment when there's something halfway between a paradox and a contradiction in a multicultural society. I would rather we said to the multicultural elements, we're glad you're here, and we'd like to share the benefits of our civilization with you. And they are particularly all the political advantages of Christianity, which involve the sanctity of the human person and freedom of speech and freedom of conscience. And by the way, you're going to need those with abortion and euthanasia and a totalitarian state bringing in hate crime. So, these are not small matters. They've got purchase at the moment. So we'd like you to be glad for those. And we welcome you. And the more you can sign up to our faith and our values, the happier we think you'll be. And they would respect us for that. The Muslims in particular would respect us for that. Yeah. Well, they have no respect at all for liberal Christians, any more than they have respect for liberal Muslims. So that would be a good thing in my mind. But we haven't got that courage of conviction. Charles hasn't got it. The people who surround him haven't got it. So they're going as far as they can towards an interfaith event without actually breaking the rules or inverting the symbolism. And I'm not sure I'm not critical for that. I think if he wants in his train to have some eminent Jews in the House of Lords, or Sikhs or Muslims, I think it's quite a clever compromise. There is no semiotic richness in terms of who follows him in the train. I mean, a few ancient English families might be put out that they've failed to be given the right to carry the king's fourth stirrup or whatever it is. But if he wants to grant that right to a Muslim lord, he can do that. I don't see any harm is done. So in actual fact, whatever fuss there has been behind the scenes, I think this may be a compromise. It's not a compromise, really. I think this may be a sensible way of managing the tensions between a highly Christian service and a highly multi-faith society.
Yeah, it'll certainly be an interesting coronation, but King Charles trying to keep the support of Christians, Orthodox Christians, and it is a very it is a group that is shrinking in the United Kingdom. I mean, those that really hold the Christian faith, it seems to be, if we look at mass attendance and attendance at the Anglican churches, what we are seeing is a program of consolidation, of closing of churches across the United Kingdom, and in 10 years' time, 10 to 15 years' time in Ireland, because when there isn't a replacement for the generation that is currently attending mass, that they are not there. Does the monarchy have a future in the UK? Will it withstand Charles, and or is this a sentimental office that, you know, the English would prefer that continues? Who will his base be? Will he shift his base from Christian base to just the popular base and be a popular king? Is this the future of the monarchy in the UK?
Well, you raised two questions, and one is the future of Catholicism, and the other is the future of, you know, and associated Christianity, and the other is the future of the monarchy. Let me say something about Catholicism first of all. I'm actually in Ireland as the guest of a diocesan bishop here, talking to seminarians and clergy and young people. And one of the things we agreed is that the future of the Catholic Church will be quite closely tied to a resurgence of monasticism, because the crisis today is not a crisis of looking after the elderly and poor and providing hospices and education and hospitals. The state has taken all that over and is determined, in fact, to keep the Catholics out, even by willing to close down adoption agencies and not have children adopted if they break the tenets of the secular state. But what we do face is we face an existential crisis. And I've just been in Chicago, where one of the things I did was to attend the annual meeting of the Institute of Religious Life. And I was surrounded by radiant young nuns. Well, I have got a weakness for radiant young nuns because they're radiant. and they're so different to the faces of the people you meet in the street. Get one radiant young nun to walk down a high street in her habit, and she'll turn all the heads, not for reasons, but because people are not used to seeing human radiance. There's a kind of, it's very, and what we face at the moment is a very serious existential crisis with a growing darkness in the hearts of people. And, you know, I was a bishop. I just want to have the local community of nuns walk up and down the high street a few times an hour, so that people would say, who are these women? What have they got? How did they get it? And I mean, I'm being a little bit superficial, but the point behind it is a very profound one. So I think Benedict is right. The church will shrink, but it will shrink to a very powerful nucleus. And so we may have to close some churches, of course, and lose them. But on the other hand, we have the secret to all human longing, and there's never been a society which needed longing more than ours does. So I think monasticism is the antidote to human despair and meaninglessness. Just look at the way these people look. And so the Catholic Church will be fine, because it has all, you know, it was monks who converted it in the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th century. However, and the Orthodox Church is growing. There are 500,000 Orthodox at the Eucharist in Great Britain. Somewhere between 2 and 4 million Catholics, depending on who shows up. Increasingly, is about 300,000 Anglicans, a diminishing number, diminishing all the time. So the future is Catholic in Great Britain, for sure. Well, actually, unfortunately it's Muslim, but it's Muslim and Catholic. And it's Muslim because demographically and politically, Islam is a political faith. You don't have to be born again to be a Muslim. You just have to be born into it and be capable of being pressurized to shape up. But meanwhile, the monarchy. No, I don't think it has got a future. I think that it might have a future if we had an Edward the Confessor on the throne. somebody who said, let's give this Christian thing one last heave and see what it does, a sort of monarchical equivalent of the monastic integrity. That might be interesting. And I think the Queen came quite close to that. But she had a kind of nunnish radiance towards the end. Yeah. And people noticed that radiance. They didn't attribute it to Christianity. I mean, whenever I spoke about it, I said, this is what happens when you have an elderly woman living the faith and meaning it. What you're seeing is a woman who's been Christianized, and nothing to do with being titular supreme governor of the church. Everything to do with an old lady saying her prayers and getting close to Jesus. And people liked it. But she came from a generation that was far too reserved about the privacy of one's personal beliefs to be of much use evangelistically to the church. She was very good in her Christmas messages. I mean, she was remarkably good in them. But I could have wanted her to be a bit more articulate and to explain where her joy and her peace and her joie de vivre and her vivacity came from. But I think probably, I mean, Charles he doesn't show any signs of being a Christian. I don't be rude, I'm not judging his soul. I'm just saying that his values are the values of somebody who celebrates sort of I won't even say monotheism. I mean, just a form of, it's a bit like who wrote The Golden Bough? Fraser. It's a bit, it's not Christian, and I'm afraid you can't persuade society to love you and respect you if you abandon your own virtues and borrow theirs and then say, now respect me. They know perfectly well there's no respect in that. Yeah. So the only way the monarchy was going to survive would be to have a vigorous Orthodox Christian saying to the non-believers, look, I'm sorry you don't subscribe to this, but it's really rather beautiful. And it's done some astonishingly good things when it worked well. And we're going to make it well, do it well, and do some astonishingly good things. So join us, but we're not going to be ashamed of it. And a lot of people would say, well, this is the kind of integrity and meaning and clarity we've been looking for in a desert of relativism. We'll come along as part of the journey with you. But to sign up to all the relativistic nonsense, it's not the recipe for success. And so I'm afraid, I mean, even the Queen nearly lost it with Diana's death. Who knew Diana was going to behave? Not behave. Who knew the Diana and Charles thing was going to fall out the way it did? Who knew Diana was going to die? Who knew she was going to tap a kind of archetypal vein of hysteria in the nation? Who knew that a vein of hysteria would nearly unseat the Queen because she made the wrong decisions about where flags were flying? I mean, it was not a matter of profound significance that anyone gave a toss about before Diana died. You know, if you ask people what they knew about etiquette of flags on Buckingham Palace, they knew nothing. All they knew was that they suddenly adored this woman, and the Queen appeared to be not sharing their adoration, so she might have to go. There was a very dangerous wobble. Well, the Queen survived it because she was a canny lady. She was well advised. She knew when to say sorry. She knew when to do an about turn. The Windsors have been good at that. I'm not sure Charles will have his mother's wisdom, strength of will, and clarity of thought. I pray he does for his sake. We need a monarchy because we don't want the Mayor of London to lead a republic. So I hope he does. I wish him well. Yeah. I'm afraid I have more fear than hope.
Yeah, it's interesting. King Charles. I was part of an organization called Friends of Mount Athos many years ago, when I was returned to the faith, and I was exploring orthodoxy and like many confused Catholics when you haven't been taught the faith, and after some painful experiences in the Catholic Church. But I did get an invitation to meet Prince Charles at the time in Highgrove, but I couldn't get over to that. People were saying, oh, he mightn't even turn up, you never know, so don't worry, Robert. But he did seem to have a great interest in the Orthodox Church, and he had visited a couple of the monasteries on Mount Athos a few times. And obviously his father was at one stage Orthodox, and his mother, she was an Orthodox nun. She's buried in a monastery in Jerusalem. I visited her grave for her tomb once. So it's just he's an interesting mix of views, but he doesn't really you never hear a good speech from him on either Orthodox faith or Christianity or Anglicanism. It seems to be very Freemasonry in his ideals and in his attitudes and in his approach to this whole agenda anyway. So it would be,
yes. I mean, it's, as you quite rightly say, Philip's mother was an extraordinary woman, and she did die an Orthodox nun. And Philip was certainly very interested in it, but not interested enough to become Orthodox, or even to have more than. I mean, he was interested in Athos, and he had lots of books on it. Mm-hmm. And who knows what happened in his heart? We're not entitled to say. But it was whatever it was. I'm sure it was genuine, but it was discreet. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to Charles, as you said quite rightly say, there's no form that the effect of the holiness of the numinous in Mount Athos has produced a shift in his thinking or his devotions. He may be interested in it, but it hasn't made any difference to anything. So if it doesn't make any difference to anything, then it hasn't made any difference to anything, sadly.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So you're here in Ireland at the moment. Do you have any message to Irish Catholics that are watching this podcast?
Absolutely, I do. I really do. I'm sorry. First of all, I apologize. I don't believe in apologizing for the generations, but I'm very ashamed of what the English did in Ireland. I mean, I'm ashamed of what I was talking to the bishop here and asking about his funny shaped cathedral, and he said, "Well, the English wouldn't let us build a tower on it." I said, "You're joking." I'm so sorry. There are many things I'm ignorant of, and that's one of them. Yeah. I'm not ignorant of Cromwell. I'm not ignorant of the famine. I'm not ignorant of the dreadful things that English Puritans did, and I'm very sorry for what they did to Irish Catholics. I'm very sorry for what they did to English Catholics. Utterly insensible. But I don't believe in authoritarian clericalism, and I'm pretty sure that Ireland has suffered from more than it needed to from authoritarian clericalism in the past. But I think I'm here to say that as someone who wasn't a Catholic, who's become a Catholic, I have all the confidence I have all the the convert's enthusiasm for something that's very easy to take for granted. It took a discovery of the Eucharistic miracles for me suddenly to discover that the fight we've been having with science as Christians ever since, I won't say Galileo because Galileo is mispresented. He was a good Catholic, and the Church has never believed that the Earth was the center of the universe. But this is the first time that science has proved the miraculous happens. It really has, and everyone is so scared of saying it. But the Eucharistic miracles are beyond doubt. There've been about 5 of them now, starting with Buenos Aires. They picked the wrong bit of the shroud. They picked the medieval mended bit of the shroud to analyze, but now they started picking the right bit. Once again, science tells us it's authentic, and there is no other explanation than the resurrection. No. Bleeding hosts contain white blood cells that come from the same ventricle in the heart with the same blood type as Lanciano in the shroud. For goodness sake, guys, it's a total no-brainer. Why isn't the Catholic community standing up saying, "But we told you so, we've always told you so, and now we can prove it"? And then also, Our Lady's apparitions are just extraordinary, and really all Christians who subscribe to the Mount of Transfiguration, where Elijah and Moses turn up, piercing the time-space continuum, and they shouldn't have any difficulty with Our Lady Theotokos. If Moses can do it, the second Eve, the new tabernacle, she can do it, and she's done it time and time and time without end. And the Church is as careful over her apparitions as it is over miracles at Lourdes. There have been hundreds of thousands of miracles at Lourdes, but only a few of them being authenticated, but only a few need to be authenticated.
Yeah.
I was convinced by her appearance in the 4th century to Gregory Thaumaturges, when she and St. John appeared to a depressed Syrian bishop and said to him, cheer up and get on with your job of evangelizing Syria. And he did cheer up, and and the fruit that came from it was wonderful. And she's gone on appearing to the church ever since. And you know, when I was a lecturer in psychology of religion, and I was looking at the footage of Garabandal, a friend of mine came into my office and said, what you're looking at? And this was a psychologist. And I said, I'm looking at children apparently being spoken to by the Virgin Mary. And my colleague said, whatever those children are saying, you can trust them. That's not to say it actually happened, it's not proof. But, and I said, well, how can you trust them? Well, because we've done experiments on prepubescent children, and they can't fake ecstasy. And those children are quite clearly involved in some kind of ecstasy. And if you're ruling out magic mushrooms, which, you know, there weren't any in northern Spain, that kind, the community, then there's a very real likelihood that what they're saying is true. Well, since it was consistent with what happens at Lourdes, Rue de Bec, and Bourgogne, and you know, 100 other places, why not consider that may be true? So what I want to say to Catholics is, first of all, it's the experience of many of us that as evil grows with influence, praying of the rosary is one of the most powerful weapons that we have. And for those of us who've had anything to do with the darker areas of the struggle between good and evil, to have something like the rosary, which works so profoundly effectively, you know, wake up, guys, why not use it? Get to know Our Lady, get to know your mother. And I would say to Irish Catholics, really, you don't know, you may have forgotten how privileged you are. This is the church that Jesus founded. This is the church that converted Europe. This is the church that saved people from treating human life as cheap. This is a church that has lived out the most profound examples of compassion all the way through. Yes, it's made some mistakes. Yeah, you know, even Jesus only had an 83% hit rate with his apostles. That Judas, there's always a Judas, but understand that you're a member of the only agency in history that's been able to counter evil, and there's a lot of evil around at the moment. My message really is a message of hope. Society badly needs to know that God made them, loves them, has a purpose for them, can heal them, and will bring them to heaven. And in the meanwhile, love and be generous to the wounded as we go. It is the most wonderful thing. It's the church. You know, forget about the authoritarian idiots. Forget about the homosexuals who infiltrated the place to express their paedophile tendencies. This was mainly a homosexual crime, not an ecclesiastical one. I mean, there is an ecclesiastical crime of cover-up, absolutely, for sure. So let's make a lot of fuss about that. But let's not concentrate on the motes when there's a beam. You know, this is the only organization in history that can do the things human beings need. It's a huge privilege to be part of it. And I'm on the last lap now. I'm just sorry it took me so long to become a Catholic. I've wasted some time.
It doesn't matter how you start. As I say to some people, it doesn't matter how you started. It's important how we finish this race. And I think these voices, your interviews, you know, will carry forward in 40, 50, 60 years, where people will look back at these conversations, and you know, it will drive you know, thought in future Catholics. And I think it's a very exciting time. I mean, the Eucharistic miracles. This is the reason I remain Catholic. I didn't become Orthodox, although they do have valid Eucharist. But I said, look, I've experienced Christ in the Catholic Church. I've had a real encounter with Christ. It's not something fake. It kind of just completely transforms your life. And I said, how can I walk away from a real encounter with Christ? Yes, there's a lot of crisis in the church. There's a lot of hypocrisy. There's a lot of stuff going on in Rome. And I lived in Rome for so many years. I saw it. And, you know, being part of the Legionaries of Christ for 9 years and seeing the aftermath of that, one of the biggest scandals, you know, it challenges your faith. And then Christ comes forward and says, well, what did you expect, Robert? take on this challenge and walk with me, walk forward with me. So it's an amazing time to encounter. I think it's an amazing time to encounter Christ in our church, in the Catholic Church, and these conversations are certainly moving into Protestant spheres, because we're asking the questions. Christ said, take this. This is my body, not a symbol. This is my body. And when people encounter Christ in the Eucharist, they're completely transformed. So I think we owe the next generation this discussion, and I firmly believe in years to come, people will look back at our conversations and say, well, what did these guys have? Why were they so passionate? Why did they believe? Why did Gavin Ashenden convert to Catholicism? I don't know, when is your biography coming out, or have you written it or finished it yet?
No, I haven't, but I keep on being pushed back to it. Can I just say a few things to any Protestants who are watching this, though? I mean, don't worry so much about Gavin Ashenden, but do worry about Polycarp, because one of the things that had a lot of effect on me was reading the Fathers, but particularly Polycarp and later Irenaeus of Lyon. But there's been a campaign of undermining the post-apostolic church on the grounds of Chinese whispers, and when people realize, and many of them don't, that in AD 160, when Polycarp was burnt alive because he wouldn't give up, he would not renounce Jesus. The centurion who came to him said, look, it's not my job to kill old men. Just sprinkle a couple of these pieces of incense to the emperor and all will be done. And Polycarp says, he's never let me down. I'm not going to deny him and let him down. But why? What did Polycarp know about the Eucharist? Already by his time, the church was talking about the Eucharist as the medicine of immortality. This is not the language of a 16th century skeptic struggling with empiricism and rationalism, which is what the Protestant church is birthed from. This is an understanding that Christ gave as he taught about the bread of life. I just want to say, because not many people know this, it's the word epiousios in the Lord's Prayer. So what is this tautology about, give us this day our daily bread? And you think, well, our Lord, there came a point when I thought, I just don't get the Lord's Prayer. I must be misunderstanding it. This should be the greatest prayer in the world, and it's rather boring to me. And so it's 7 lines with 3 either side, and the first and last and the second, third, they interpret each other. And right in the middle, you have this spinal prayer, give us this day our daily bread. But the word in Greek doesn't exist anywhere. It's made up to express what Jesus said in Aramaic. And it's epiousios. It's 2 words, epi around and everywhere, and ousios being. So, this is a prefix that has everything to do with and contains and pertaining to being. So Jesus, give us this bread, this everything pertaining to being bread. Give us this day our pertaining to being bread. And it was Origen, I think, who translated it 2 ways. One was daily quotidian bread, and the other was epiousios. And I just didn't understand I still don't understand why the church went with Origen's Latin and doesn't say, but this is a miraculous word. This is a word that goes to the root of your being. This is a word that defines all conception and definition and containment and had been made up. And it's a miraculous word. It's talking about a miraculous thing. It's in the Lord's Prayer. So if you doubt how to interpret the Johannine teaching in sort of 5 and 6 about bread, look at the Lord's Prayer. It tells you the whole thing is about something miraculous, and the early church understood this. Now, if this wasn't true, then when you went to Origen, when you went to Polycarp, you could say to Polycarp, look, John taught you all your Christianity. You must have spoken to him about the Eucharist. And what did it mean? And so by AD 160, you still had people who got what Jesus meant from the apostles. And by AD 160, the same understanding of the Mass was in place as it's always been in place at all times, everywhere, until the empirical rationalism of the 16th century. So which is right? It's not the reinvention of the wheel in the 16th century. It's what Jesus taught the apostles, what the apostles taught their successors. It's what they did everywhere. And then the Eucharistic miracles have never stopped. And although I made the mistake of thinking, yeah, they're overwritten, they're hagiographical, can't trust them, science has suddenly said, yes, you can. So, ditch the presuppositions. Come and let Jesus fill your mouth and your face and your heart and your soul in the Mass. Don't go to a place where they serve blanks like the Anglo-Catholic Society. It's, come to Mass, meet Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you were talking about Epiousios. I just did a video today, and I was there's a prayer group that's beginning on Tuesdays next week, and I was just doing what is the piece of scripture I wanted to talk about, and I took the prodigal son, and I was reading through, at the start, the younger son asked for a piece of the inheritance, but in Latin and Greek, in Latin it's substantia, and in Greek it's ousia. And I was there, I said, okay, look, when I was reading in the Dewey Rams, it says substance, so they've translated from the Latin, but and really it's more profound than people think. It's the same with the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread, and in Greek it's a completely different translation. But I think all of this, because we've dumbed down the faith so much, these conversations are lost on so many Catholics because they haven't been taught. They
catechized. No, and we're back to our radiant nuns. It's their renewed and radiant ousia that we're seeing.
Yeah,
we see radiance on their faith because they've taken the epiousios bread of life, the living Christ, and it's bursting out. Yeah. It's all peace.
Yeah. It is. It's quite amazing. I was just back from Poland, and I was in the Divine Mercy Sanctuary, and it's full of nuns. It was just, nuns in the dress that would have been there pre-Vatican, Sister Faustina, the exact same, with the headdress. And there's nuns everywhere, and you could see it as well. Dominican friars going around Krakow. It is a different environment, and I think it's a challenge to us now. We can't sit back. We have to bring out all these treasures that are in the church, and the Eucharist is, you're presenting our Lord to somebody. What can't he do when he gets into a soul? Because that's my experience. I wouldn't be so passionate about this if I hadn't encountered the risen Lord in that real way. And when he talks to you and asks you, go forward, Robert, talk about your experience with me. It's life changing. And you can't fake this. This is the experience with our Lord. It can't be faked. And no. And you're so right. And it's amazing that you're talking about the early church fathers. I'm just reading through I don't know if you've ever heard of it, the Philokalia.
In my Orthodox stage, I knew it well. It was a badge of honor to have read it, and and again, like you, it draws you towards orthodoxy. And I would have become Orthodox, except I was sent as a seminarian to an Greek Orthodox monastery. It had a great effect on me. And I've always said to the Lord, I'd like to be Orthodox, please. And he's always just said, no, you can't.
Exactly. And but there's a lot of the early fathers in the Philokalia are Catholic. These are Catholic.
We should have a fusion between East and West. And again, that's the great beauty of the pre-schismatic, the pre-schism Church of 1054. There was this interplay, and it's part of our human fragility, and also, of course, the work of the devil, the diabolos, the divider. But there's always a tension between the uniting spirit that cross-pollinates and fertilizes and brings the richness of the East and West together, the left and right brain, and the diabolos is eaten apart. So we need to make sure that we don't miss out on everything the Holy Spirit has done in the East by being too proud about the West, and then say to the East, but look what we've got in the West. Come on, guys. The whole Catholicos.
Yeah. But thank you so much for your time. I know you've had a busy day traveling on your motorbike to Ireland, and I'm praying that the motorbike will get you back safely to England.
But driving a 1250 motorbike at 68 is a stupid thing to do. So pray that my guardian angel doesn't have to work too hard.
I will. Thank you very, very much, and God bless you.
Lovely to talk to you. God bless you too, and everyone listening.
Thank you.